Welcome to the Burrillville School Committee regular meeting, December 11th, 2018, Burrillville High School Media Center, 425 East Avenue, Harrisville, Rhode Island. Members present, all with the exception of Sean Buzan. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Chair, motion to convene to executive session under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A, School Committee 101.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will poll us into executive session. Ms. Lacy? I'll polling us into an executive session. Once I do that, then we go.
Probably for a song, and he knew people, and he hired some. It looks like it's a guy and a buddy.
Oh, yes, right, he's taking on the entire.
Signs on like an HVAC or, you know, but I
They're
think they did
renovating?
a lot of the stuff.
I don't think he was aware of the,
They're renovating, totally
Oh, they
renovating?
got it to the studs. I mean, it's all new.
But it looks
You
nice.
can tell it's all new siding, all new roof, all new sheetrock, all new plumbing, all new electrical. I mean, I can drive by when they're working, I can't see Pike Street.
Robin,
Looks nice.
put another piece of coal in the fireplace?
Oh my goodness.
Like, I know we're tight on money, but Scrooge, can we put a,
Yeah. Yeah, you know.
yeah,
I
I
wonder
know.
if it's gonna be a,
But the mics aren't on yet.
I don't think so, I think.
so my little dump truck is a diesel, right?
Well, yeah, I bet you do get that a lot.
Right? And so I got up this morning and I forgot to plug it in last night.
Flippers usually move.
And I tried to take off a little bit before warming it up. I did get it going, and then I ran into some fuel trouble, and I was off to the side. It took me a good half hour to get myself on the road this week. Yeah, no, it was, I don't know, 14 this morning, I think. If I had plugged it in overnight, it would have been fine. Yeah, that was the number. Right? Yeah.
I know, well, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, welcome to Burrillville.
line on Route 7 as soon as you get up to Burrillville.
Yes, right. So you're going to be on the alert for the snow days, because they're numerous. Although Burrillville does a good job managing the snow.
Yes. The MOA?
He's actually out
Yeah, everybody's gonna
on
say
surgery, so hip surgery.
I know what you're talking about.
You know, I was thinking,
I'm a big weather geek too, so I'll be happy to lend you my expert advice.
It's going to be about 4 o'clock, 4 a.m.
Justin,
Well, I'm always up at 4 a.m. anyway. So
1 minute.
perhaps even earlier, because I do snow removal stuff too. So yeah.
7:05, we're back on the clock.
2 or 1 or midnight.
Well,
or
Sylvia sits down.
Busy time.
Be ready.
Usually we get a quick phone,
coming.
text message call with superintendents.
I'll give you another like
4,
5-second
4:30,
countdown to bring the meeting out of
Fine. Thank you.
executive session.
Good times.
We all ready? All right.
And the only thing I'm gonna say is that.
That's correct.
So we've already convened, so I'm just gonna.
Oh,
Maybe.
Mark, do you want to just introduce Mackenzie to
I
new
will.
committee members?
Yep. Ready when you are, Justin.
Okay. All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to make note that there were no votes taken in executive session. I would also like to welcome our re-elected members and our newly elected members. And I would like to introduce to the new members our student council representative, Michaela Mackenzie.
Welcome, Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back in our regular session. Item 4, recognition. We have none this evening. Item 5, consent agenda. Approval of minutes, warrants and invoices, bids.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting November 13, 2018, the executive meeting November 13, 2018, special meeting held on November 28, 2018, and approval of the warrant number 5 for the month of November dated December 11, 2018, in the amount of $2,686,065.46. There are no bids.
Have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to recuse myself from voting on the minutes because I was not at that meeting.
Thank you. You don't need anything from me, do you? Item 6, presentations by the public to the school committee. In this case, it will be our CIA director, Ms. Mayu.
Good evening, everyone.
Stand back a little bit.
Okay. Thanks, Justin. Sorry about that. All right, so as you're aware, the state released the results of the RICAS assessment late in November, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to do a little bit of history on the testing situation in Rhode Island, to talk about Burrillville's results, and to talk about where we're going next with this. So just to kind of fill people in, if you're not familiar with what's been happening with Rhode Island in terms of assessment, Rhode Island has gone through several different state assessments over the past 20-ish years. If you've been around in education, you might remember that a while back, the new standards reference exam, and then the NECAP assessment, and then the PARC assessment, and now we've moved to the RICAS. And so what's a little bit significant about this is that each time that Rhode Island has switched its state assessment, it has been because we have switched our state standards and curriculum. And so RICAS is actually the first time in recent history, at least, that we have changed our assessment, but we have not changed the state standards. So the assessment that students took this year, the RICAS, actually assessed the very same standards. It's based on the same state curriculum that the PARC was based on. So this is an unusual, unique situation for us in Rhode Island. And I'm sure you're well aware, you know, we had PARC in place for about 3 years. It seemed like the right way to go at the time because it was directly related to the Common Core standards. But of course it was slightly politically charged. And what we've seen is that many states have fallen away from it. So what was a very large cohort of states who were using the PARC has now dwindled down to maybe, I think, 10 or 11 at this point. So Rhode Island moved away from it, but did not have the wherewithal as a very small state to create its own assessment. And so we looked to our neighbor Massachusetts, who had demonstrated quite a bit of success by creating their own assessment and sticking with it for about 20 years and showing tremendous gains among their student populations. So that's where we are. Massachusetts was not interested in creating a consortium of any sort, but they were more than willing to let us use the assessment that they had created. And so that's what the state of Rhode Island decided to do in the Department of Education. So the big question this year, of course, is what are we going to do with the results of the test? How do they look compared to last year, and how do we even begin to compare them? So last year, this is Burrillville's performance for grades 3 through 8, and RICAS assessed grades 3 through 8. So last year in ELA for grades 3 through 8, we were at 32% of our students who were either proficient or exceeding proficiency on the PARC, and about 23-ish% who were proficient or exceeding proficiency in math. You know, certainly not the best performance that we would ever hope for among our students, somewhat consistent with the state performance, and 3 years in, we were starting to see a little bit of a gain, right? The first year was not very good because the first year of testing rarely is, and we also had issues with student participation in the PARC as well. So scores were kind of up and down for 3 years, and that's where we were. This year, we're thinking about how we compare our results, and the reality is that a true comparison is really just not possible. And the reason is that because although the RICAS assessment assesses the same standards, the expectation for proficiency on the RICAS is actually higher than that of the PARC. So, for example, just to take a specific example, in a third grade math assessment, if there were 6 questions on operations and algebraic thinking in third grade, the PARC, for example, might expect a student to answer 4 of those questions correctly in order to be proficient, but the RICAS would expect you to answer 5 questions correctly in order to be proficient. So, in theory, a student could have performed the same same way both years, but on the park would have been proficient and on RICAS not. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so that's what we're looking at. So score by score, you can't really make a good comparison. So we're trying to think about other ways to show, to make those comparisons, to talk about what's happened to kids over the past year. So these are our specific numbers in terms of our proficiency for math and English language arts on the RICAS this year. So you can see for math, we're looking at, red was below proficiency, yellow was partially proficient, green was proficient, and blue is exceeding proficiency. So about 17% of our students are showing proficiency or exceeding in math this year, and about 25% in English language arts, which is roughly 6 to 7% lower than what we saw on the kneecap. So what are we going to be thinking about this year? Well, the percentages are what they are. It's the first year of an assessment. We have to kind of take it in stride and look to see what happens as we become used to the assessment and we have another year to compare it to with those true percentage scores. But we can talk about some other things. So one of the things we can look at are the cut scores, which are the cutoff for where you fall into those categories. So the RICAS is based on intervals of about 30 points across the test. So 500 is the cutoff point for proficiency. So students who scored between 500 and 529 were considered proficient. 470 to 499 was partially proficient. So one of the things we can look at is where our students fell in terms of their cut scores. So for example, our elementary students in Burrillville on the ELA assessment had an average cut score of 490. Which means that even though we have a big chunk of kids, that 58% or thereabouts who were in that partially proficient range, they were much closer to being proficient than they were to being partially proficient. They had about 20 out of 30 of those needed points. So that's good news for us. That says that they just need a little bit of a push and a little bit of a boost to kind of get over that line. And as a district, we were averaging about 488 for ELA cut scores if you look at 3 through 8, and about 483 in math. So right about the halfway point, right? And that gives us a sense of what we need to do to kind of get them to that proficiency level. The other thing that we can be looking at are growth scores. So the state of Rhode Island has been using growth scores actually for quite some time. They started calculating those with the PARCC and kneecap. And so a growth score explains how a student's change in learning compares to other students who fall into the same category. So any student who is in grade 4 through 8 this year is able to have a growth score compared to other students across the state who performed the same way on the PARCC last year. So for example, they would look at all students who scored a 1 or all students who scored a 2 and look across their scores from last year to this year and see what their growth rate was. And that's expressed in percentages. And so our growth actually looks much better than our scores do. So in Burrillville, in math, 67% of our students showed typical to high growth across the course of a year. And you think about typical growth as being what we would want a student to make in a year, and then we had about 30% who exceeded that. In language arts, about 65% of our students showed typical to high growth over the course of this year when compared to their similar peers across the testing. And our students in general showed an average growth percentile of 50% in ELA and in math. So any growth percentile between 34 and 69 is considered to be typical. So we had a good half of our students on average who showed pretty strong growth across the course of the year. So what are we doing? The first thing that we're going to do is to keep calm. And so I'm going to go from the bottom up. Our curriculum as it stands right now is fully aligned to the expectations of the RICAS. In other words, our students are learning and are being taught what they need to be successful on that assessment. So we're not going to make any dramatic changes to our curriculum at this point. We need to see how that performance looks over the course of the next year when we have another round of testing so that we can compare those apples to apples. And then at that point, we may find that there's a need to tweak. I anticipate that we might need to make changes, for example, in the sequence of instruction, right? There may be something that is emphasized more heavily in fourth grade on the RIDECast than perhaps, that perhaps we might be not teaching until the end of the year, until after testing is done. So that sort of thing, I think, might be something that we'll be looking at, but all of our curriculum goes through a cyclical review. So every 5 years or so, we are looking at all of our curriculum across the board and talking about changes anyway. And so we'll be starting over the next year to really look carefully at some of the released items that come from RIDECast, to look more closely and deeply at our students' errors and doing some analysis of that. We don't have access to that yet. And to see, where did Burrillville's kids struggle and where did they do really well, so that we can know more closely and clearly what we're doing well in the classroom and what we need to work on. And then gradually we'll make changes with our curriculum with that. And just above that, we're also collaborating with RIDE and with the group Ed Reports to implement high quality instructional materials. So the research will tell you that second only to teacher proficiency, the use of high quality instructional materials has the single greatest impact on student success in the classroom. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that all of our students have access to those instructional materials. That was part of the rationale behind the implementation, for example, of Eureka Math this year in grades K through 5, to make sure that there's that consistent continuity of instruction across all those grade levels, and that every child in every classroom has the same access to that high quality curriculum, the high quality instructional materials. So we'll be continuing to look at implementing that at different grade levels and across different content areas as we go through the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And finally, the shared leadership work that we've been involved in is, we hope, going to have a big impact on this. We know that high-performing districts utilize instructional rounds and classroom walkthroughs as a means of providing teachers with the opportunity to continuously learn from each other and to see what's working for children in other classrooms and to learn from their colleagues in order to improve daily practice. That's something that we've got up and running this year for all of the teachers in our district. We're really proud of the work that we're doing with it, and we're looking to continue to build that out as we go forward. And so finally, I'd just like to conclude by sharing some better news. Our SAT scores were actually quite good, especially in comparison to the rest of the state. So our 2018 SAT scores, 61% of our students met or exceeded their proficiency in ELA, and 42% met or exceeded proficiency in math. And on the PSATs, we had similar performance, 66% met or exceeded in ELA and 39% in math. Again, is that where we're content to rest our laurels? On our laurels, absolutely not. Ideally, we want to see every student meeting or exceeding proficiency. Certainly we'd like to see numbers that are stronger than this, but I'm encouraged by the fact that these numbers, our students who are sophomores and juniors in high school, show much greater strength than our elementary and middle school students, and that tells me that we're doing something right and moving in the right direction. So that is all I have for you, unless there are any questions.
Does any members have a question for Julie? Mr. Allen?
I'd be remiss if I didn't at least chime in briefly about what I think you alluded to, which was with respect to the park participation rates, and I think that certainly skews some of the numbers substantially. As you know, and most of you do know, I was an outspoken critic, not necessarily of the park in and of itself, but the underlying standards that went with that test. I think the goal of a lot of the objections for the test was to undermine the Common Core standard implementation. And I think that set a tone district-wide that put the, I guess you could say, the importance of the test perhaps a lot lower than it may otherwise have been.
Right.
Whether you agree with it or not, I think that clearly shows in some of the results. I still have those same sentiments about the standards, and I think I would still remain a vocal opponent to some of those standards. I think there's a lot of work that could be done to improve them, and that's perhaps outside our purview, as a school committee. But I would still retain that, and I don't mean to be on a soapbox to take this time to say that, but I do want to just chime in and say that to recognize that those test scores were probably heavily impacted by a lot of the the political aspects of what was going on. But I think the good news piece of it is good news, you know, the SAT, the PSAT stuff. But I would be encouraged to see, you know, what Massachusetts had originally done, which is what, you know, which is the right way to do it, to develop a test collaboratively with teachers and all the stakeholders and come up with a plan that's successful. It's kind of tough to pick and choose from another state's successes without going through that process. So
Yeah.
I guess you can make the best of it with what we have, but you know, I still disagree with the way the standards are, and that's a whole other discussion, but hopefully moving forward we can continue to do the right things, and obviously the SATs are a testament to that. We're still teaching kids a lot of good things, and whether or not those standards are impacting us or playing into it, you know, teaching is really the heart and soul of education. So good teachers make all the difference. So
I agree.
I'm done with my speech. Thank you.
Well, and
for
I
your
would,
presentation.
no, thank you for that. I agree. You know, the other piece too, I think that's really critical that I neglected to mention is that, you know, the comparisons to Massachusetts are inevitable, right? And really for the first time now, we're able to compare apples to apples, Rhode Island to Massachusetts. And I'm sure you heard some of the remarks, you know, if all of Rhode Island were a single LEA in Massachusetts, we would have performed in the bottom 10%. So that's not, and you know, that's not good news to hear. It's very difficult to hear. But what I was encouraged by were the remarks that were made actually by Marianne Snyder when we went to a briefing on the RICAS results. You know, and her very eloquent point was, we have an obligation now to stay the course and do right by our students and emulate Massachusetts. You know, they obviously have gotten great results, and we need to look at why. We can't just cherry pick and say, well, we'll take your assessment and we'll take this and we'll take that, but we won't do all these other things. And the key piece of that is sticking with one set of standards and one assessment for more than 3 years at a time. RIDE stated to us that they are committed to seeing this assessment through, that they want to keep it in place for a long period of time so that we are able to learn from it and continue to grow from it. And I truly hope that that's what will happen, because it does make it difficult when we're constantly switching to get a sense of what our growth really looks like. So.
Well, let's hope that the General Assembly and RIDE get a grip on what they're doing with our students, because we certainly have a grip on it here in Burrillville, but
I think so.
we're taking direction from them, and you know, they can't get it right. Sorry, that's my piece of bad news.
Yeah, right.
Dr. Salito?
Just to build on a few things that Julie said. Massachusetts has been using the MCAS for 20 years. This was our first year. So speaking comparatively and looking at apples to apples, it's really an unfair comparison when we're in year 1 of implementation and they're in year 20. The other component to that Mr. Allen touched upon is the perceived value and importance of the test. I can say that I'm pretty confident that the SAT and PSAT, that parents and students value those, because they've been tested throughout time, and they've been vetted, and they know what the SAT is about. They know what the PSAT is about. Kids take those very seriously. Parents take those very seriously. They value the process, and I think we see that in our results. I'm not sure you can say the same thing about the RICAS. And you're talking younger students. You're talking even really in education circles, where we truly hope that this is the last set of standards and assessment that we see. But in my 20-plus years in education, this is probably the 7th that we've seen for state assessments. So it's very difficult to hit a moving target. You know, it doesn't mean we're going to stop trying. Doesn't mean we're going to do anything, to undermine the test or anything like that. But we've got to see some consistency at a state level. We have to see some consistency from the Department of Education, and we have to value and build a value within our community where students and parents are valuing this test and take it seriously. I know that the RIDE has been responsive to backing off the days and the number of testing and the percentage-wise percentage of test days that students were missing out on. They heard that feedback from the field, and they've been responsive to that. But it's really important to stick with this. If we're going to see long-term gains and we're going to learn from this, we need some longitudinal data, which we just don't have when you change the test every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
That's my soapbox. So.
I want to add something. I've been to the Rhode Island Association of School Committee meetings where we've had a presenter who actually worked with the MCAS and created it. And he said that if you're going to adopt it, it needs to, you adopt everything. That's also include, I assumed he was talking about testing, retesting, or reteaching the kids who fall in the cracks, and then retesting them so that we bring them up too. We need to bring all of them up, and I think that's what Massachusetts is doing.
Yes, anyone else? Hearing none?
May I ask one?
Sure.
That comes on the heels of Sylvia. Okay, I gotta preface this. I was in that age group when the Kennedys got shot, but back then, every teacher had a pretty clear curve of proficiency of the students in their class. And if I leap and assume that's still true, if we rolled up the teacher's assessment and aggregated it through 3rd through 8th grades, does it look anything like the results of the test? Because if it does, then it shouldn't really be a surprise. If we have kids in the lower quarter struggling, and we have a fat middle, and we have a few on the top that are excelling, then it shouldn't come as a surprise if that's what the results were. But if we think they're all flying high, and then we get this result, that's a whole different kind of problem. So I guess my question is, how big of a surprise was it compared to what our teachers already know the panoply of performance level is on the kids that they teach? Because I know they still go from here to here.
Yeah, I feel fairly confident saying that our teachers have a great handle on where their kids are and where they're performing. And I think that they really deeply know, especially I think, in grades 3 through 8 where they're, well, I'm thinking elementary where they have the kids in front of them all day long, right? The same children all day long. But across the board, our teachers know their students very well and are able to, I think, pretty quickly sort out, which students might be struggling, which students they expect to be proficient, which students they expect to exceed proficiency. So I think that student by student, if teachers look at this data, I don't think that they would encounter too many surprises. The real question is, for us, what are we going to do about it, right? And once we have the opportunity to really dig into the individual student data, that's going to be the next conversation, right? We knew that these students might struggle on the assessment, so now what are we going to do for them to bring them up to that next level? Because we need to. Right, exactly.
So Justin will admonish me for not having you go to the podium, but if you could at least say your name and address, that would be half of the battle, right, Justin?
Dennis Anderson, Whipple Road.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I just build off of Julie's point? I think our teachers and educators can know their kids so well, but I think when they come in to take a test, just being, a certified teacher myself, there's so many other factors that play into their performance. Did they eat breakfast that morning? Did they have a good morning at home? I was never a good quote-unquote test taker, so I may have understood the material and been able to give a speech about it, but when it came to the test, the clock was like in my ear. So I think there's just so many other things, other factors that play into it as well, that our teachers can know absolutely everything about our kids, but may not, expect their performance to be what it was that day. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else?
I'll just interject, the lost time on learning with the computer-based testing and all of the changes is what you hear from most of the communities. I work over in Massachusetts in a school district. I've worked in a couple, and it's a constant. You hear from the parents, you hear from the teachers, there's a lot of lost time for teaching and learning, which is a concern. So I think hopefully Rhode Island will stay with these standards for more than 3 years, and we can move forward.
Right. Exactly.
Anyone else? Thank you, Julie. Great. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Item 7, public comment. Anyone wishing to speak this evening? Having none. Item 8, personnel, appointments, leaves of absence, retirements, resignation.
Chair, motion to approve sabbatical request Kevin Cash, Social Studies, Burrillville High School, 2019-2020 school year, and wish him well in education.
So I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Having none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve leave of absence for Ryan Zilli, Physical Education, Burrillville Middle School, November 28th through December 12th, 2018, and Sarah Brayton, grade 5, Stair Farm Elementary, January 2nd, 2019 through June 30th, 2019.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion?
Is it for health reasons in this instance, or is it a sabbatical?
Which one?
Well, we already did that one. The sabbatical?
What is it?
Or,
Is this without pay?
Brian Zilli is a
Paternity.
maternity
yeah,
And Sarah Brayton's personal leave.
personal leave,
It's
yes.
leave without pay.
Sarah is personal?
personal.
Yeah.
Motion and a second. We're under discussion. Any further discussion? Yes.
Will we have someone to replace her by January 2nd?
Yes,
Full-time?
full-time, yes.
Thank you.
It's already been arranged.
Anyone else? Having none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Mr. Chair, make a motion for athletic promotions, Burrillville High School, 2018, 2019. David Farrell, boys hockey head coach, $2,519 plus. Brian Porter, boys hockey assistant coach, $2,103. Jennifer Carlson, boys volleyball head coach, $2,387 plus $200 longevity. James Lambert, wrestling coach, assistant coach, $2,103. Terrence Gosher, girls hockey volunteer. Nicholas Samick, wrestling volunteer. Shane Farrell, boys hockey volunteer. And James Hopgood, girls hockey assistant, Burrillville hockey coach, Burrillville High School volunteer. And Craig Hool, boys hockey assistant, Burrillville High School volunteer.
Second?
Dot, could I have you add to your motion that all appointments are pending BCI checks and proper paperwork?
So
Approval of
moved.
proper paperwork.
Second.
Motion a second, any discussion?
I just have a question.
Yes.
Is the boys volleyball team, is that a new team?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. I just wanted to confirm. I think that's awesome.
Anyone else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 9, old business, fiscal year 19 BSD budget update.
Motion to open, please.
Second?
Motion open in a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Without any questions from the committee, I'll accept the motion to receive and file.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make that motion to receive and file, but I also would like to please consider and the recommendations for the transfer of money from the orientation and mobility line item, $12,000, transfer the general supply line item, $3,000, transfer from the postage line item, $5,000, and transfer to special education transportation line item, the total of $20,000.
Second.
A motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Fiscal year 19 rink budget update.
Motion open.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to receive and file.
Second?
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item 10, superintendent's report.
Motion to open.
Second?
Motion open in a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Dr. Salito.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just 2 items to mention in my report this evening. I want to start with an update on our career and technical education programs at the high school. On December 7th, I attended the State Career and Technical Education Board meeting. It was held at East Providence High School. There's a new application process that's been established for program approval. The window to apply for Department of Education approval for CTE programs for next year begins on December 18th, closes in late January, and the board will no longer allow for provisional approval. It'll be full approval for programs only. That'll be granted if the program meets the established criteria from the Department of Ed. So as you know, we currently have 3 RIDE-approved programs: engineering, construction management, and environmental science. We hope to apply for 3 of our existing pathways for full approval. That includes our child care program, our biomedical pathway with Project Lead the Way, and our computer science program as well. So I'll be working closely with both Dr. Whaley and Elaine Sardella, who is our career coordinator, to get these applications completed and submitted within that window for approval from the Department of Education. Any questions regarding the CTE update? Okay, moving on, next item. As budget season fast approaches, Robin and I have been meeting with the administration and team to discuss next year's budget. We'd like to hold a work session with the full school committee to discuss the budget process and where we stand. I'm recommending and opening for discussion that we do this prior to the winter break. And again, would recommend that we meet during the week of December 17th.
So we have the dates of December 17th, 18th, or 19th available, and we'd like to have input from the committee. We could do 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever the committee decides. Really, whatever time the committee decides, or one of those 3 dates. So if we could come up with
Just
something.
one of those dates?
I think we could, 17th, 18th, or 19th.
18th I can do.
18th,
I can do any.
18th is a start.
18th should be good for me.
Is everyone good for the 18th?
I actually would rather, I prefer the 19th if possible, because I'm going to be out of town, the 17th and 18th.
19th.
19th is January you're talking about, is a Saturday?
December.
Oh, December, I'm
Next
sorry.
Wednesday.
Next week.
That's a Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
Wednesday of next week, December 19th, 5 or 5:30.
5:30?
Can I, yeah, anytime after, like 5:30 and later, if possible.
Drive slow.
It's a touchy subject, Mark.
So,
5:30 on the 19th.
so next Wednesday, December 19th at 5:30 in the administration building. Okay, it's a meeting. Be discussing the bright future of our budget. Anything else, Dr. Salito?
No, that is it for my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for the superintendent?
Can I have the 3, the ones that are not approved yet, the CTE program?
The
You
ones that
have
we,
childcare, computer science, and biomedical?
biomedical. Those are 3 that we'll be applying for. We do have a number of other pathways that we're not planning on applying for full ride approval just yet.
Do I need to get a motion?
No.
Okay. Ian says I don't need a motion now for anything on that. Item 12, reports of school committee item 11, administrators' reports.
Mr. Chair, a motion to receive and file with a big thank you to all administrators, staff, and students for the great educational information, arts, sports, and other great projects presented in all of the reports that were given to us. Thank you so much.
Second.
A motion to second. Any discussion? Alex?
I have a few, as always. I just wanted to say good luck to all of our chorus and band kiddos at both the middle school and high school level. I know they have their holiday concerts coming up in the next 2 weeks. I think tonight was the high school's concert.
Tonight
It
was
always
the high
falls
school.
on the night of our meeting, but I'm sure that went great. I just wanted to make note that I think it's awesome that we still do the turkey trot and the Thanksgiving dinner at Levy. I think that's one of the beloved traditions here in Burrillville, so it's heartwarming to see that that still goes on. What else do I have? I did just want to thank the administration teams for not only putting together our school packets, but then also adding the additional bulleted list of their duties and the meetings they've attended. I think the packets themselves are so intensive to put together, so to add this to their list, I think is just amazing on their end. So
Yes, it is, yeah.
thank you for adding that, and happy holiday break to all of our students and faculty members. Enjoy that nice week off, and let's hope for no snow. And I'm going to end on that note.
Anyone else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next item, reports of school committee subcommittees. Having none, we'll move on. Item 13, correspondence, communications. I have one. I'd like to make note of an article in the Journal regarding a Burrillville High School graduate. This Rhode Island man is a member of the Honor Guard for the late President Bush. He's also the nephew of one of our own members, Terry Lacey's nephew. Coast Guard Seaman Brian McConnell, 19, a 2017 Burrillville High School graduate, regularly greets high-profile dignitaries in Washington, and he was the Honor Guard for the late President Bush. So that's
That's incredible.
it's an honor to have him as one of our graduates, and I'm sure you're honored to have him as your nephew.
We're very honored, yeah. Yes, indeed, that's beautiful.
He was a little nervous, but
Yeah, I bet. Memory of a lifetime. Anyone else?
I just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. See you all next year.
Did you bring the festive supplies?
I just have my red sweater. That's all I could, it's the best I could do.
Nobody got the memo about the ugly Christmas sweater thing? No.
What do you think? Not quite.
Thank you. Item 14, new business, MOA for School Building Authority.
Motion
Mr.
open?
Salito?
Yeah, so we have a,
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Motion
Okay,
open?
fair enough.
Have to open that?
sure, we started it.
Okay,
Let's go with
finish with it, all right.
Have a motion open
Second.
and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So we have a memorandum of agreement before you today. It's from the Department of Education School Building Authority, and this is a requirement, a new requirement from the Department of Education that each school committee member signs this, and this basically is our agreement for reimbursement on our capital improvements. We'll be reimbursed $53,290 based on our approved project cost. 53% of the $100,548 that was spent, and the town had appropriated the use of our, allowed the use of our capital funds to fund those safety projects, and that work is either in progress or complete. And we will not get reimbursement unless the MOA is completed and signed by each school committee member and the superintendent. So, asking for your signatures on that this evening.
So, if Ann, you have an original?
No, Dr. Salito or Robin, they have
Okay,
original.
somebody has an original that you want us
Not
to
that one.
You
sign?
can use this one, this is fine.
Okay,
Motion to approve.
Second.
a motion approved, discussion?
Just one piece, I'm going to be acknowledging that I've received the copy of the RIDE school construction regulations, which I'm not sure that I have. I kind of was looking for stuff, but I don't, are they available online?
They are available on RIDE.
Because I kind of wanted to have a chance to look, and I apologize again for not having had this conversation prior to the meeting, but I didn't recognize that it was a stipulation until late. Is there a possibility we could have the signature at the budget meeting? Could I table it to then? And
I can send that, I can send out the, a link to the regulations in my Friday memo.
If you could, I appreciate it, just so
Have it
I
Signed on the budget meeting on the 19th.
like to be,
Excuse me.
Yes.
Actually, it needs to be signed by
December
December 14th.
the
So we
14th.
need to do it now. Yeah. But I can send you those regulations tomorrow.
So what I might recommend, if Donison's the only one that would like to read that, if everybody could sign except Donison, he can go to the link, read them, and make sure you get into
And I will come to see you.
Office.
You're,
for the 14th.
and the 4:30 is the administration building closes? I've been pretty good about getting back to town by then,
That's
so,
fine, if you're gonna be a little late, that's.
okay.
as long as
I'll
we
call
can
you.
get it in for the.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so if everyone else could sign it this time.
I think she has a copy that's not written on. Ours all have
This is
this
fine.
on it.
This is
Yep, I
fine?
have my copy.
Okay. We don't have to put opposition, just
No,
signatures,
just
right?
signatures, yeah.
Okay, so well, I think while that's going around, we will continue, if that's okay? Or you made a motion, are we good with that? or-
We're just gonna, like, what happens here now? Dot, can you withdraw your motion to approve?
So done.
Nobody seconded it, so,
We can just- yeah, no one seconded that motion anyway, so.
so we didn't need to withdraw it?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Well,
Would you provide a
so
second?
should we have a motion to approve pending the signature of Don Allen at a
So
few-
moved.
by the 14th?
Second.
Okay, so we have a
Okay.
motion, a second. Any further discussion on that? All in
Let's-
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Just in case they said it wasn't in our minutes for approval. And we're not gonna give you the $53,000 now.
Okay. Got it.
Right.
Thank you.
Can we move on while waiting for these
Thank you.
signatures?
We did that.
Sure.
Okay, next item.
Thank you.
School committee subcommittees. So everyone has a copy of their school committee subcommittees. Did the best I could with the information I was given. And this is where we ended up, and I do have to reiterate that, as far as the three highlighted items, no one person can serve on any more than one of those subcommittees. That also, just to clarify, that the alternates only serve when the appointed is not available to make it. And it would be up to the appointed person, if you cannot make it, to notify the alternate to fill in your place. And while we're on that subject, attached is our updated contact list so that everyone, and this is going to be given to the public as well, so you might want to have filters on that, but this is everyone's updated contact list that we have, so any changes that need to be
Mark?
Okay, so I have a change, Alex has a change?
Oh, I don't have a change.
Okay,
I just had a comment.
okay, so we have,
Didn't I just do
Do you
this?
want
I
do you want
have
me to send
one.
one copy around for revisions?
Yeah.
yes,
Fair
please.
enough.
Oh, my
Use-
goodness.
Can you use that copy?
We can use
Because
this
it's already
copy,
started.
because it's already started.
The rate revisions right here.
I have a subcommittee question.
Okay,
I see that no one is assigned to Callahan's school improvement team.
correct.
I am willing, I don't know if I can attend those meetings because they're at, I believe they're in the morning.
Okay,
But if no one else is either, I don't mind being that liaison between Buzzy and the committee and checking in with him to see how the meetings go and any meeting takeaways or whatnot.
okay. Is anyone else interested in
I was gonna voice also.
Callahan that could go to the meetings during the morning, because they're in the mornings, right?
I think they're at 9 a.m.
9 a.m., and that probably, that would be
They're
hard
either
for
at
you.
9 a.m. or they're right after school at 3.
They're right after school.
Yeah,
Both
one
would
of the
be-
elementary.
Both would be difficult for you, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Right, okay.
So if someone can't attend,
I could attend the 9 a.m., but the right after school.
let me see what
They
these
don't have it at 9.
team minutes say in the superintendent report. Just give me 1 second.
And Sylvia, if you're interested in William L. Callahan, you could do either time, right?
Yeah.
What, no matter what the time is,
Right.
you could go, okay. So there's our first choice.
after school.
They're after school?
They're after school.
Oh, they are? Okay. They're after school.
Okay, so
Just to
Sylvia for the Glenville Callahan sit team.
okay.
And we have one more, which is the after-school extended day board of directors.
That, can I add to that? That's, that meets the first Tuesday of the month
At what
at,
time?
at 6, I believe.
6 PM?
I think it's 6. And it's at Stair Farm
You want any
in the
changes
library.
on that? Yeah, I just want to, this is.
And I was it up until last year, until this year. But because I have, sometimes I work, I can't make it to there.
Okay, would anyone be interested in the board of directors for Beck?
What time did you say the meetings were?
6 PM
6.
at Stair Farm Elementary.
I can do that.
Great, thank you.
When did you say, Sylvia, that they were?
When?
When?
First Tuesday of the month.
First Tuesday.
Right. The town has already been asking me who the liaison will be, and they'll get in touch with you about this.
Okay.
All right?
Okay, so you can keep that, make corrections, and forward that in next week's packet to everyone. So I've corrected, Don,
Just one question, the limitations on the bolded subcommittees for attendance, is that from RIDE?
for attendance.
For one committee member being on that versus?
Oh, that's our bylaws.
That, in the bylaws,
That's
gotcha.
our bylaws.
That's our, okay,
Right, that's our
got it,
bylaws. And again, if reviewing the bylaws, anything that might be a recommendation that would help us to function better, I'll have a review.
Okay.
So,
One more?
yes,
I do go sometimes to the, Healthy Schools programs
Health
in
and
the
wellness?
state. And I'd like to be an alternate on the Health and Wellness Subcommittee.
so, I don't know if alternate counts for being, so that would be, have your name on 2 of the major 3,
Oh,
even though it's an alternate, I
well, I see
don't know.
Dorothy's on
That's allowed
both of
per the
these.
bylaws.
Yeah, the bylaw says no.
Okay.
Oh, no, Dorothy's.
Right.
You can check the bylaws, so.
But we can look at the bylaws and see if that includes alternates, because I think alternates is something that I developed, so.
Okay.
So we can review we'll have Dr. Solito review the bylaws to see if alternates are included in that. And if alternates are not included, then Sylvia would be an alternate for the Health and Wellness Subcommittee.
Okay.
Look into that tomorrow.
Okay. Any other questions regarding subcommittees? Do we need to, no, okay. And, again, everyone will get an updated contact list. Ann will get that to you pretty quickly. So, item 15. Committee comments on agenda items. Having none. Item 16, pending issues. I will accept a motion to remove the Levy Rink construction project from pending issues.
So moved.
Second?
Motion is second, discussion. Having none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 17.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Christmas, everyone.
Christmas left in here today.
Oh,